Peta,
Hello.
thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you are somebody who has built numerous businesses, had a lot of ventures in your time, ranging from a Pilates studio to a bit of sales business, bit of all of that, and now an online program, which is really, really cool. That's my sum up of you, but I guess for the people listening along that don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself.
It's like, oh, what version do we have? Do we have like the dating profile version where I'm like, I like butter and coffee and I'm a writer? Or do we have like the LinkedIn version? Because I feel like when you kind of talk about yourself, there are so many, like it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like that Foursquare challenge: LinkedIn, Facebook, Tinder, and whatever else.
What was it? Facebook?
Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, so how do you summarize yourself? It's really funny. I was at a conference today and everyone asked me what I do, and I find that I just kind of amend it depending on the person. But I think that's the problem when you're a little bit of a slashy. Sometimes you think, am I going to undersell myself? Because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a copywriter. Oh yeah, okay, I'm a business consultant. I'm a business coach. What else do I do? Full-time professional babe, which is my company.
Yeah. So actually, and I should have said that in the intro. I'll do it in the intro of the podcast. But your Instagram title is The Professional Babe, I believe.
Yes,
if I haven't
it is.
misquoted
And that was quite strategic as well, because my name, Peter Serras, I don't want to say it's not memorable, but it's the kind of thing where like that's a bit hard to spell.
Yeah, and a little bit, I mean, I must admit I was a tad nervous coming here. The pronunciation of it, you don't quite, in the intro to the podcast, I'll try my hardest to get it right. But it is a little bit, anything that's hard to say is hard to remember. So
yeah, I know when I have consulting clients come to me and I'm like, you need to make sure that if you tell like a 13 to 15-year-old that they're going to be able to remember it and spell it into Google. Like you have to tell them once, it has to be memorable. And that's why I went with professional babe, because when people like the professional babe, almost like the audacity, like it's just something that you can't forget.
Well, it's polarizing. I mean, we'll get into you get a lot of love on social, but you also get a lot of hate on social, and you deal with it in a really cool way. But it's kind of polarizing, I assume, like as you say, the audacity, and that's what I think makes it stand out.
Yeah. I know I've been in the media a couple times and they're like the professional babe, which is really funny because I'm like, if they did their homework, it's like, that's the name of my company.
They're just giving your company a plug on national radio and television. For free. Yeah. So I guess, you started your life up in the country, up where Maitland. Is that country? Have I offended the Maitland people?
Well, I would say that it's country. Like, it's not the kind of thing where there's no traffic lights. Like, we have traffic lights. We now have a Mecca Cosmetica.
Fantastic.
But this is new. Like, we only got a Mecca about a year ago. And the bus didn't even come down my street. Mum and dad had to drive me to school because if I was to walk to the bus stop, there was like snakes and reptiles and kangaroos, and they were like, oh, this is just too much. We'll drive you to school. So I guess that's pretty country.
I would, that fits my definition of country. But I guess your first business there in Maitland was a Pilates studio, which, had its ups and downs, but you were filling this Pilates studio out in no time. Tell us a bit about that journey and what you're now using, I guess, as a two-pronged in businesses today with those lessons.
Yeah, so I started my business back in 2009 after, I think when I finished school, and I don't know if you find this, we're really like, okay, school is finished, university is next, but I didn't want to go to university because I hated school. Like I was one of those kids that I never had to study. I kind of have a bit of a photographic memory, so I was always bored. And when my teacher was like, what are you going to go and do? And I'm like, I'm going to go and work in a shop because I want money. And everyone was kind of like, that is ridiculous. And I just kind of fell into Pilates because mum was like, well, you need to do something. And this course came up and halfway through the course, I actually completely dislocated my knee competitive cheerleading. So I've got pins up my leg.
Oh, wow.
And
the scar's still there.
yeah, I've got heaps.
Wow.
I've got
I mean,
about,
you can't see it on camera.
I've got about 8 scars on my leg. It's pretty gruesome. Like it's a bit gross. And that kind of changed things for me, where me thinking, oh, well, maybe I want to go overseas and like work with a dance company, or maybe I want to do this. And then all of a sudden things changed for me, and I thought, no, I really want to teach dancers. So I started in the like East Maitland Bowling Club, and it was so funny, Tim, because this is actually not funny, but it is funny, but it's not funny. They would often have wakes there. So people, like, you know how when someone dies,
yeah,
like
the bowling club, it's a weird spot for a wake.
So I would go and like, I would be 20 and I'd rock up with everything, and the staff wouldn't want to kick them out of the wake. So I would have to go in and kick like people out of a wake so I could go and teach a Pilates class. And I'm like, you learn a lot about people.
That's almost your first foray into sales and objection handling there.
Yeah, like, because I had to go in being like, okay, how are we going to phrase that? Give them time. If your clients come early, we'll just start with coffee. Like, I had to kind of problem solve all of these different scenarios. So I think because of that, now in business, any challenge that comes my way, I'm like, well, I'm not kicking people out of a wake. Like, nothing really compares to that. And that only lasted for about, I think we were there for three months, but probably about 6 weeks in, I remember handing flyers around about Pilates for dancers at dance studios, and we walked into this space, and I said to my mom, I'm like, oh, this would make such a good Pilates studio. And then I remember it was probably about a week later, I saw that they were moving, and I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen to their space. And I didn't even know like what went through my mind. I think it was just being really naive. I just drove there and was like, it's a Tuesday. Dance studios are always open on a Tuesday. So if you're watching this, like Tuesdays and Thursdays, they always have dance classes. So I went there and I'm like, what's happening to your like space? I want it. And I was 20. I'm like...
Did you feel like a lack of respect as well?
No, I felt nothing. I was just like, this is normal. Like, you're not going to be here. Like, who's going to...
Yeah, it'll look good to your landlord that you found a tenant already. You know?
Yeah. And that's basically how it started. And it really ended up exploding. Like, in Maitland, you had a gym membership and that was it. No one knew what Pilates was. Like, I had nothing for people to compare it to, because it's not like that there was something that was in the next neighborhood and they can be like, oh, she's in no comparison to them. Like, I basically was the person who, I don't want to say I introduced Pilates to that area, but like, I think, there was 2 studios in Newcastle, but I really had the ability to kind of set the tone and be like, here's what incredible Pilates is, and here's what it looks like. And I get to be the person to deliver that to you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You're really encapsulating this phrase, don't be better, be different. Because you could have easily started another gym or another yoga thing or whatever, but you're being different. So I guess as a broad concept, you're being different, but what in your business encapsulated that, do you think?
In the studio, or like what I do now?
Yeah, the studio, like, no, right, yeah, right. I'll go that and then we'll go into now.
Yeah.
Like, it's because it's a cool question. But
yeah. I approach things with what would I like, which I know we're always told, like, don't do that. Like, your ideal customer is not you. But I would be like, oh my gosh, if I was going to the hair salon and they knew it was my birthday, imagine showing up with a birthday cake. So I would do that for my clients. Like, we had wine. Like, if they had a hard day, I'm like, let's just crack a bottle. And they absolutely loved that. I made the effort to know their husband's name or their children's name or their dog's name, all of that stuff, all of these little things where I found that people had just kind of glossed over because they saw it as, well, they're only here for an hour, so I'll be nice to them in that hour. Where I'm like, well, for some people, they're coming to me 3 to 4 times a week and they've moved here for work. And I'm the person, apart from their colleagues, that they see the most in their week. So I need to be really conscious of that. And I think that that's something that everything that I've done in business, I always carry that belief with me.
I think a lot of people get so concerned with trying to find new leads and new customers and new propositions, but that means they then forget the people that have already bought from them. And, you know, there's so much untapped potential in that group of people. So that's what you're basically doing there, right?
Oh, completely. And it's something that it's so bizarre to me how you always see, like, especially really big businesses, like banks are a perfect example, is people will be giving them money for 20 years and then there'll be an offer that comes out and it's like, hey, come with us. If you're a new client, we won't put an interest rate on your credit card for 6 months, where it's like, could you imagine ringing up the customer that's been with you for like 20 years and saying, we're actually going to give you this offer? Like, you would go on Facebook and you would be like, this is so incredible. Businesses don't do that.
No. A perfect example of the banks. I know for a fact, because I've got friends in the finance industry who they've had conversations, because they're a broker, so they deal with the banks, and their customer said, hey, you're offering new customers this rate, can we please have a drop? And the bank person said, oh no, we're only prioritizing new customers. Are you serious? That's throughout a lot of our, like, we don't want to just bash banks, even though it's a lot of fun to do, but you know, they do hold our money. So
I hope they're not like sponsoring this episode or something. Could you imagine? Could you imagine like a banner at the bottom?
Well, like one of the we're talking the big four here. One of the different banks, like maybe Upbank or something.
Yeah.
the new nimble ones, they might want to chuck a sponsorship. But this customer service, I was talking to a friend yesterday who knew someone who worked at a luxury and sports car where people are spending millions of dollars on a McLaren, and the after sales service is just such high quality. Like, they'll fly mechanics to where you are. If your car breaks down and you're overseas driving the car, they'll fly someone to come and fix it. Like, yes, okay, different category, but like, what do you think we can learn from just that level of service, do you think?
I think people need to see, especially now, like, business is so different now to how it even was when I started with my Pilates studio. Like, we had a MySpace page. Facebook wasn't even really a thing. Like, so much has changed since then. So I could have done something like one small thing in business and it wouldn't have really mattered, where now you just have to stuff up in a small way, but piss off the wrong person and it will explode. But then the same thing happens on the flip side, where if you have really great service. I actually saw something on Facebook by an entrepreneur called Jasmine Star, who I've just started following. I really like her as well. And she was talking about how they were adopting a baby in Vegas and they weren't really sure like what was going to happen because of the adoption process, and how like she was driving up the strip with her husband and she's like, oh my God, we're so not prepared for this. And she rang the Four Seasons and she put on Facebook and she has a big following, like they are tight. And she put every single thing that they did and she's like, I will always be so loyal to them. And I'm like, that is good business, because they just were like, here is a customer and we're going to show up for them.
Yeah, very cool. It kind of takes it to that extra level. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk's talked about, instead of giving me a fruit basket, if you went through my social media, you would see that I post about the New York Jets, which is a team, every Sunday. So instead of a fruit basket, if you had like a New York Jets hat or something on the bed, how much of a bigger difference would that take? Now, flip side to that, I've told older generations about that and they said, oh, well, if you did that to me, I'd be downstairs talking to the manager. Why are you stalking me? Fair point. Fair point. So it's hard. Like, where do we draw the line? But I think if you could just do something just a little bit extra different, maybe it's not you see that I'm a wine lover, so it's not a basket of fruit, it's a bottle of wine. Yeah. Maybe something less stalkery and specific. But.
Yeah. I did that for my graphic designer once, which everyone thought was really crazy, because they're like, you pay him, like that's enough. And I thought that's such a weird approach. because I feel like I'm like, being a business owner, I know that we're underpaid. So, and he has just gone above and beyond with so many things that I found and it could have probably been a little bit crazy, but I was so prepared for that. I found his wife on Facebook and I sent her a message and I'm like, what alcohol does Lee drink? Like, I want to send him something. And she's like, oh, he really likes beer. And I'm like, okay, beer. And I know nothing about beer. And then I had to go back and I'm like, can you tell me a little bit more about beer? And she said a couple of his favorite brands. And then I just like went looking online and I found a package and I just sent it to him. I didn't really think anything of it. And he rang me up, but you could kind of tell in his voice that he was like stunned to the level of effort that I went to. I didn't even really think it was that much effort. I was more worried about, oh my God, is his wife going to think I'm crazy? And then I thought, what if this goes to her other folder? And then I'm like, maybe I can find his sister. And
Oh my God.
I'm going through like trying to like mind map like all of these people. And it really wasn't that much effort. Like, it was more just being like, I hope someone receives this.
I don't go to all this effort and put the wrong address in or something.
Yeah, but that was that was about 5 years ago, and I just like to do like little things like that.
It's the little things that add up so much. And I'll go back to the woman that put the thing up on Instagram.
Yeah.
Casey Neistat did the similar thing when, oh, it's bad, I forgot who the airline was. It was probably Emirates. They upgraded him to first class, and then he did his very first, this is the tour through the first class lounge. Video got like 10 million views. Talk about publicity for Emirates, right? Like, it's just these little things. And I guess it's hard also, when can this become tokenistic and when can this become genuine? And I think it becomes genuine when you give without the expectation of return.
Yeah.
When it becomes inauthentic is when you go, oh, if I give someone my free ebook, then they'll have to do business with me because I've read Persuasion by Robert Greene, and I think reciprocity is a thing. Like,
Yeah.
So where do you think for you the line is drawn? Because you're very giving, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing where like now, and I guess it's happened to me before, where someone has done something that you think is really like nice, and I know that there's good intentions behind it, and then they're like, oh, let's take all of these pictures now for Instagram. Yep, do this, hold this, and you're like, oh, okay, so it's this point where it's like...
And I'll give people listening context to that. I mean, you've got a fairly large following on Instagram. It's about 10,000 followers. Yeah. So people could see that and then try and leverage it, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes like that's what happens.
Also, they've, heard on radio, TV.
Yeah.
They see that and sadly, it's just human nature, I suppose. But, not cool.
I think it's all a learning experience though. Like, there are some things that I never started my studio and everything was smooth sailing. Like, I had so many hiccups. And I think that that's important. So if you do something sometimes and you're like, oh, I really stuff up there, like, that's okay. Like, it's just, okay, well, what do we do for next time? Like, how do we pivot? And something that, oh my God, I love Mel Robbins. Do you love Mel Robbins?
I don't know him.
Mel
Robbins.
Robbins,
I know Mel
5 second rule.
I haven't consumed any of her content, but definitely within the radar of people. Yeah.
So she said something yesterday on her Instagram, and it's like, are you bad at interviews? Watch this. And it was like a little minute clip, and I watched it, and she's like, you're not bad at interviews. You just gave a bad interview. And she's like, you need to separate yourself from that. So a lot of people might be like, oh, I suck at customer service, or I always get this wrong. It's like, no, you didn't. One time. Like, what can you learn from that and move forward? Because it's just a learning experience. It's always going to be a bit different. Yeah.
Love to get into a bit of the consulting work that you've done, because before your online course, you're very much a consultant and still are a consultant. Based off, and you're not just one of those, you're a no BS business coach. I think that's the tagline. Because there's too many business coaches out there. If you're thinking about being a business coach and you haven't done anything, stop. Because, you have the Pilates studio. I'll just give a quick summary. Like, you built it up to a good revenue that you're enjoying. I won't get specific unless you want to. You had DVDs that came out. You were featured in 2-page spreads and really built this business. So you've had that plus other businesses. so then you moved into consulting because I think, obviously teaching and, but yeah, tell me a bit about that and how that started and how's it going?
Yeah, it kind of was something that I fell into because I started to have my Pilates peers who had had studios for such a long time and who they were amazing. Like, let's be honest, they were better at teaching than me, but probably were of the generation of, oh, I'll just sit and I'll wait to be asked, where I feel like if you're under the age of 35, you kind of feel like, no, I'm going to go and get it. So I was I'm just going to go and get this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to make my own Pilates DVD. And they just started asking me questions. So they would be like, oh, I have this idea for like a course. And at the time, like I was investing a lot in like online courses and coaches myself. And I was just kind of giving them this secondhand advice that was taught to me that I was implementing at the time. And then all of a sudden I would just be like, oh, you help so-and-so with this. So can you help me with this? And then it got to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I love running a business and all of that stuff more than being in the business. And I realized that when I would get to a point where I'm like, oh, I want to open another Pilates studio. And it's like, no, you don't. You love the challenge of like having a startup and then seeing it do well. You do not want another Pilates studio.
Yeah, because you could have gone down the, free Pilates studios now I'm franchising. Now you could have done that. But, I think if you are then a consultant, if you enjoy the challenge of a startup, you can then go and consult all of these different businesses and be like, no, well, have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it that way? And is that what you really enjoy?
Yeah, like I had a session with someone last week and I'm finding that I work with a lot of incredible female entrepreneurs who are still stuck in this like belief of, oh, I need to not charge a lot and I need to really serve. And
not just a female entrepreneur problem.
Oh, is it?
No.
Well, it's so...
I got pulled up yesterday, actually.
About your prices?
About my prices.
Yeah, increase them.
He said, nah, too low. What are you doing?
Yeah, raise them. I'm all for, raise your prices. If you haven't raised them in like a year, you need to raise them.
Yeah, my context around why the price was at what it was at was... I'm first year business, trying to get some runs under the board. Like I've got a bunch of content out there anyway, but in terms of getting those testimonials, but he still looked at me and said, nah, what are you doing? Like bang, bang. And I think the problem still with me, my uncle taught me out of it. He's like, as a creative person or as a female entrepreneur, I'm a male entrepreneur, but as a female entrepreneur, we want to help people. We're so empathetic and we see someone's problem and we see them struggling and then we go, and then they go, oh, cool, okay, I want to work with you. How much do you charge? And then you go, oh, well, because you've got this situation and that situation, I'll do it for you half price and whatever. And to a point you could do that. Like, if somebody's really struggling and you think that by helping them, eventually they'll be able to pay you for a price, fair enough. But if you're not charging at a good rate, and this is probably me directly quoting my uncle, if you're not charging a good rate, you are not helping the client because you're not going to put the most time and energy. Do something for $39 and then do the same thing for $250 and see how see the difference. But you're robbing yourself, you're robbing your family, you're robbing your right to have a life, right? And I talked a little bit too long there, but tell me your thoughts on.
I agree. That's like what you said was pretty much what I said to this client that I had. She's an expert in what she does. She's incredible. She's completing her master's at the moment. She's really devoted like her whole life. And I said, there's going to be people who have just finished their qualification that are going to come in and they're going to charge more than you and they're going to release this with confidence. And I'm like, you are such an expert. You need to just charge more. And I started to just ask her different questions. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're going to, so I think she was going to give this program she was creating for free to her current clients and then charge a very, 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 very small fee to like people who weren't a current client. And I said, okay, well, like if you were to charge this compared to, let's just put a hypothetical $1,000 compared to, say, for example, a $50 offering, and like what's the difference in how you're going to show up? And you could kind of see something click for her, and she's like, oh, I'm going to show up so much more. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, and if someone slides into your DMs, which they will, with a question, and like, you're not going to resent answering that because you've charged them that. I'm like, not everyone is going to do that. And I said, but you need to have your pricing. I said, be so inclusive. You have to just account for all of these little things. So when someone's messaging you at 10 o'clock at night because something's happened, that you're not going to roll your eyes and be like, ugh. Like you want to kind of be like, oh, I feel like I'm like getting served so much from this program that I feel happy to answer this and help them and serve them.
Yeah. So basically price at a point to which you can then do the little stuff happily.
Yeah. And I think too, like your customers don't need to know that that's included in your pricing, but that's something when I do my pricing, like,
I think you called it a nag factor or was it a nag factor? It was something a little bit more polarizing.
I can't even remember what I called it. But, an asshole tax? Was it that?
Yeah, it was probably an yeah, it could have been that. The politically correct is maybe slightly annoying tax, but you're right. Like I think it was about sussing the situation, and if you know this person's going to be, the counterintuitive argument would say work with people that you only really are passionate about working with, and then those phone calls become easier.
Yeah.
But sometimes you almost have to. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. Like you don't want to take money from someone who's draining you, but sometimes that happens. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends. Like, when you increase your prices, you also have the ability to let go of clients. Like that's something that I did in my studio. I was told, and this is a really good point. If someone's giving you advice, look at their business, look at their life, and look at their boundaries. And if there are fires all over the place, do not take advice from them. Where if someone is giving you advice and they have exceptional boundaries, they've got a really profitable business, they've got a great life, they have great relationships, I would take advice from them. So all of the people who are like, you need to teach these people, you have a business. I'm like, your life is a shit show. Like, why am I taking advice from you? It was to a point where I would have some clients that would diagnose like health issues for other people in the class. Like, they would just look at them and be like, you have this wrong with you. And then the client started to complain. And I'm like, right, I could have this one bad egg that could make me in a bad mood, and then that's going to affect my whole night of teaching. It could piss off the rest of my clients, or I could let them go.
I had a friend who he had a client that was paying them $8,000 a month.
Yeah.
But was just on his case every single day. And I just told him, I said, do you reckon if you fired them, you could find 2 clients that you love working with for $4,000 a month? Well, yeah. And so he fired the $8,000 people, and then like a month later he had 2 more people at $4,000 a month that he loves working with.
Yeah, completely agree. Like at the end of the day, if your hands are completely full with your current projects, your current people, you're not going to have room to serve the people that you really want. And sometimes it's this hard decision. And I guess it's like a limiting money belief of, oh my gosh, I'm turning away money. Like if especially if you're in a cash flow crisis, or you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a startup, I need to get money, and you feel like you need to serve all the people, but you have to conserve your energy. Like that's something that's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Very true. In terms of your consulting, do you have and this is almost like, I ask people this question if they're consultants, it's almost like choosing your favorite child, but do you have a case study or a client that when you think about it really makes you smile and these are the results I got for them, and they came in all nervous about their business structure, and I've now taken them to some really cool. Yeah, there you go. You got them. You got them because you smiled. So
the funny thing is, I'm working with even though I'm like I work with women, I'm working with a guy at the moment, and he has a startup, and He is so, like, you look at us working together and we kind of look, not like we look mismatched, but you kind of look at him and you're like, oh, you would work with like a real like corporate dude in a suit. And I will turn up every time we've turned up to our appointments. It's been like a 45-degree day and I've been in like a bikini and like this little throw-on dress with my hair up and just this like real like no BS attitude because it's hot. Like, you know what it's like when it's hot and you're just like, ugh. And it's so funny because he has this startup idea that I can't talk about too much because it's still all in the works now. But we basically talked about his marketing pipeline and he was so stressed about, okay, well, when I release this product, who am I going to sell it to? And I just said, look, we're just going to have these going side by side. I'm like, you just relax. Like once you have the business name and that's sorted, I'm like, you kind of know your long-term vision. So it's like, what, even though you have this incredible product, like what do you want to be doing a couple years from now? And you told me, I'm like, great, this all can work. I'm like, we just need to have this in our marketing now. So your clients who buy from you now, they're not like, oh, wow, this is a complete sidestep. It all seems like it's just the next progression. And we kind of worked out a framework in 60 minutes and I left thinking, oh my God, I've not only saved this man probably $30,000 because I think what a lot of people do is they're like, right, I've got my product. Oh, okay, now I start marketing. And I'm like, no, we do that as soon. I'm like, you don't even have to have a product. I'm like, you have the idea, you're developing it. I'm like, we're going to build your audience. Because I think for me, when I started my Pilates DVD, I didn't do that. I'm like, let me do all of the work of creating this product. And then when it's launched, I'll market. And I was tired. I said to him, I'm like, it's like signing up for a half marathon and then realizing, oh my God, this is actually a full marathon. Like you still have to keep going, but you aren't in that mental headspace where I'm like, if we do it this way, you'll think you've signed up for a full marathon and you'll get halfway and they'll be like, oh, you're done. And you'll be like, oh, wow. And I just knew, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to release his first product and it's just I know it's going to sell out because he is going to do the hard work now. And I'm like, we do that in an hour and it could save him like tens of thousands of dollars, but also the mental sanity of just being like, why isn't this working? And it's like, it's not that it's not working. It's just like marketing. It takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But $30,000 saving in an hour, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm like working out, I'm walking home and I'm like, I reckon it'd be this much. Just when I found out like what my friends were paying in the industry for list building and Facebook ads, all of that stuff. And that was just probably an underestimation. You think as well, like we've all had the website that we've spent $8,000 to $10,000 on. And then we get really clear on our branding and we're like, oh, this sucks. I need to redo it.
Yeah. That's why landing pages are so good. Lead pages or whatever it is you're using. It's so good. That actually kind of leads me to this question. You are very much the entrepreneur that does everything yourself. You wear all the hats, and you wear that very proudly. In terms of website building, in terms of copywriting, in terms of like all of this stuff, very easy to outsource. We know Upwork exists. We know Fiverr exists. We know virtual assistants exist. Unless you didn't know they exist.
Surprise!
Surprise. Fiverr.com.au. Any small graphic design, I'm going to like annoy graphic designers here now, but any tiny graphic design stuff you need, go check it out. You'll save your time and money. I'm not sponsored by Fiverr. But you very much take on board all the stuff yourself. You've coded your website. You've coded your course. Tell me about that as a learning experience and beneficial to even when you now go to outsource, how much it's going to help you.
I think a lot of the time you don't know if you're getting ripped off. I think there is this new wave of entrepreneur coming through. And I guess I've never been in a point financially where I'm like, oh, I can pay for a website. I can do this. I can pay for someone to do that. I can hire a VA out. Like I've always had to start things myself, but I know that when I go to outsource it, if someone quotes me $15,000, I can be like, oh, that is not a $15,000 job. Where are these new wave entrepreneurs that I think are getting into cash flow crisis because they'll have someone be like, oh, we're going to charge you $2,000 for a logo. And that includes 2 revisions. And then after that, it's like $700 a revision. And then they're like, oh, okay, yep, that seems reasonable. And I'm like, no, just start yourself. Because I think too, it's never as well, like I will get to a point with my website where I will outsource that and I will gladly pay and I will love paying that money. But you need to be able to do things yourself. One, because I believe that if you do something and you feel it's successful, you're in the safe zone. You are not really utilizing your potential. You need to fail. If you're not failing, you're not doing business. So I would rather fail on my dollar and my time than fail paying an expert $200 to $500 an hour. Like I want them to get it right. Like I want them to work on it the 8th time where I'm like, okay, here is exactly what I want. And I can give them a clear and concise list. And I know that when the time comes for me to hire a virtual assistant and a community manager, I'm going to give them a very concise job description and I'm going to know exactly what they want compared to me outsourcing someone. And I don't want to say all VAs are like this, but not everyone is incredible at their job.
Well, they're not you. Like talking about community management, right? So go back 10,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
Now, yes, we're not even probably going to go into the ridiculous messages that you get, but face palm all the time or something. I show half the messages that you get to my girlfriend. Like, did you ever get that? But you would be tempted because there's such a volume of people, 10,000 people there, to outsource community management. Because that would be illogical.
Yeah.
You get overwhelmed. I built a TikTok to 20,000 and got overwhelmed with the amount of work. But if you were to do that, it's not you.
Exactly. And I see it all the time. Like there's Brooke Castillo. Have you heard of her? I feel like, oh my God, you have to, like, this woman, if I saw her walk up the street, like I would cry. Like I love her so much. And I love her as well because she talks about money. I don't understand entrepreneurs that don't talk about money, but she's very like, I made $25 million US last year working 3 days a week. And I'm like, oh my God. And then she's like, and I have a team of 10. And I was like, oh my God, like it was just so good. And she's like, but we're really good at hiring. Well, we're great at firing and letting people go. We have really clear job descriptions. Like here is exactly everything that you need to do. And I know that I will get to that point where I'm like, right, I know exactly the person that I want. Here is what the job looks like. And then if they come on board and I'm like, no, they're not the person for me, like I'm going to have to let them go. And this is why when people are like, who know me, they're like, I want to work for you. And I'm like, oh, I could never hire someone I know because
you need to be able to cut.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that I see happen in business all the time is entrepreneurs or people don't want to do the work. I'll just pay them to do it. But then there's so much emotion in there that they don't want to fire them. And that's what's sinking their business.
I want to talk about your membership you just started.
Yes.
So what's the name of it again?
The Professional Babes membership. I kept going to call it the Professional Babes Mastermind.
Membership's a little bit, it probably explains it a little bit.
Mastermind's a bit more American, but I did laugh because I actually was putting it out on the marketing sometimes on Instagram, the Professional Babes Mastermind. And I was like, oh, look, guys, no big deal. Like, it doesn't matter. And it was so funny. Some of my entrepreneur friends were like, I would be mortified, but you're so funny how you're like, nah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that actually. Like people get so obsessed with making the perfect video, the perfect filming. Like I started this podcast with just this, like this thing. Well, it's a little bit bigger, but something that has the same microphones, and I would just put it against the table.
Yeah.
And off I went. But now I've got 3 different cameras and these microphones and if I obsessed for years or over the perfect microphone,
you wouldn't have started.
Wouldn't have started.
Yeah, you wouldn't have started.
Yeah, so like you putting those posts out, membership mastermind, yeah, like if you did it consistently and then it would be an IMC problem, but once or twice, like,
yeah,
so yeah, the Professional Babes membership, what's it all about? How does it come about? And you've already had some people go through it, so keen to chat about it. Yeah,
it kind of it's so funny. I always wanted to do something like it, but I had a couple of blocks of what am I going to call it? Even, I feel like I created this story that I need to be a full-time consultant before I roll this thing out. And I'm so glad that I ended up in a bit of like a cash flow crisis, and I was so unhappy with what I was doing before. I'm like, right, I'm going to quit everything and I'm just going to do it. And then I had the drive of, well, if this just doesn't work, I'm homeless, like I'll get evicted. So I went into it being like, I just have to make this work. And I knew it would go so well because I personally don't think that I'm expensive to work with, but I understand what it's like in a startup, especially if you have a bricks and mortar business, how much money is going out. Okay. And you're like, oh my God, I want to work with someone, but I can't afford that. And that was me. So I'm like, right, what can I do which is like scalable? It's not me trading like time for money, which is what my private consultant it is. Like that will return good money.
You're still doing that. Like, yeah, but this is something, as you said, scalable.
Exactly. Like that's limited. Like at the end of the day, I only take 10 private clients at a time. Any more than that, and I just go a bit crazy. I like to kind of always have my finger on the pulse of someone's business, remember things where anything more than that, I start to forget stuff, and that doesn't help anyone. And I know I'll get to a point where my membership will have, say, 10,000 members, and at what will be $79. Like that's a lot of money. That's great money. So I'm like, what can I do that is scalable, but also community focused? So one of my core business values is community, because I know for me, when I first started, I went to networking events that were filled with like gray and navy suits and middle-aged white men being like Pilates, spitting their breakfast muffin all over the place. And that was my first start in business.
Oh, cool.
No. And I'm like, I so lacked community when I started. And I said that, I'm like, you will, like, when you hit roadblocks, which will happen, you need to have people around you. And like your friends and family, I'm sure they're lovely people. They don't get it. If they work 9 to 5, if they have the privilege of sick leave, they don't get it. And like, you need people who literally have broken their business, or they're like, oh, I remember the time that like the roof of my building flew off, like the time that at my Pilates studio, we had bird lice in the ceiling. I didn't know how to handle that. I was 21. What do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, but things happen, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, and unless you've been there, done that, it's hard to, you know, not give a non-Google answer, you know.
Exactly. And it's been so good. Like I will constantly like open the membership. Like I'm always in there. You know what I'm like? I'm always on my phone, and I don't like, I'm not one of those people that's like, I hate my amount of screen time. I love it. I feel like I could be on there more.
Especially as a business person, my girlfriend is very understanding. But, you know, we were watching Married at First Sight, and I was just on my phone, like networking with people. And she's like, how are you networking at 9 o'clock? I'm like, there's people in other countries.
And it's prime networking time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, and as soon as I explained that, she was cool with it, which, you know, I'm very lucky to have someone supportive like that. But got to be careful what's recorded. No, generally. But apart from that, it's these things that people don't get. That just you have to go that extra step when you have your own business.
Yeah, and that's why I'm like, I wanted to create a community of people that just like absolutely got it, and it was so. I had like a proud parent moment the other day when someone recorded a video and she was so unsure about putting it up, and it was really good. Like it wasn't just us saying this is good, like it was really good. And I watched it and I was like, oh, I'll have to write back. I think I was out doing something. I had all of these groceries and I'm like, I'll write back when I go home. And I opened it and I went to write back, and everyone like flooded it, not just with, oh, this is good, or like a love heart emoji. It was like paragraphs. Like, and then when she uploaded it, They went on as well. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to cry. Like, it was so good because I'm like, that's what you need when you first, oh my God, look at me, I'm teary.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you need when you first start. And I'm like, I love that I have created this.
Yeah, so it's a real community. I mean, you have, is it weekly calls that you do or monthly calls?
So we do the format at the moment just because like there's not too many people now. We've launched, oh my God, like a month.
We were actually going to.
Oh my God, 1 month.
Oh, well done.
Woo, 1 month.
We were going to hold this podcast in authenticity. We were going to hold this podcast off until 6 months where you had like heaps of people, but you were like, nah, stop it. I can do it now. So yeah, for a month, but you've already got such a community in 1 month.
Yeah. So we do, at the moment we do 2 group coaching calls a month. And how I work them is someone will come to me with a question. And something that always I didn't like, I always see in business, if something happens and you don't like it, you kind of just have that as your reason to, okay, we won't do that. So I always hated how I would be on a coaching call and people would ask questions like, this doesn't apply to me. And I'm like, oh my God, how selfish am I that I want everything to apply to me? But we're all a little bit like that. So I'm like, how can I create masterclasses out of these questions? And that's what we've done. So people will submit their questions and then there's usually a theme, which is really bizarre how that happens. And then we'll create like a little bit of a masterclass. So the last one we did was marketing and we were talking about low cost and free marketing solutions. And now we have this carrier pigeon in-house joke, which is quite hilarious. So we have that, and then we have 2 masterclasses a month of, I call it like girthy content, where it's very like, it'll be something that they're not just going to be able to do in a day. It's going to take them a while to do. We have our personal development resource. What else do we have? A book club. I have a startup in the works as well that's kind of just been put on the back burner a little for cash flow reasons. Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to invest too much into this now because I know I need the money to get it off the ground. I mean, I know that I just need to park it.
What's the elevator for it?
Fawny Kate, wellness without the wank. Because I've worked in wellness my whole life and I don't like the elite white culture that we're sold of wellness looks one way. So it's, a wellness brand without the wank.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? How?
But the cool thing about that is you can document that, and I know
I'm doing in the membership.
You can document that in the membership.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. Like I am being so transparent about this. Like I have said, I will tell you where I get my roller bottles from. I'll tell you how much money I've spent on this. I'm basically breaking down that startup and putting it in the membership. So if people who don't have a business come in, it's like, well, here is how I started a business. Like, here is the bones. Here is a framework. If you want to follow, if you're like, shit, how do I come up with a business name? Here is how I came up with the business name. Here is why, and tips as well.
Very cool.
Thank you.
I think that's a really awesome spot to leave it on. Actually, gives people a good roll into.
Can I come back when it's launched?
Oh, of course. Yeah, when that's launched. Yeah.
I've got you on camera now.
Yeah, it's recorded. No, I like to have people on because of this next. I have 2 more questions, and so what's coming up for you in the next 6 to 12 months? It can either be what's really challenging and you're excited to get over the challenge, or something that you're super pumped and excited about bringing up in the next sort of 6 to 12.
When's that? Is that August? August, December.
I'll keep it easy and say 12 months.
Okay. Or we could just do end of the year.
End of the year.
Okay. I have a goal to have 300 members in my membership.
Awesome.
Yeah. I have in complete transparency, I think a lot of people think I have hundreds of people. I'm like, I've got 20. But I'm so excited to declare that because I know that there'll be a day when it's like 20,000.
Exactly. And we'll have it on record here and we'll go back to
Everyone needs a start.
Yeah.
So I'm like 300 is amazing. And I have a goal for the end of the financial year to basically have like my consulting and my coaching to be sitting in like the 5 figures a month.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on.
Very cool. And if people have heard something through this show and really cool, and they want to reach out to you or, you know, check out the membership or whatever, where do they go?
Okay, never email me. I'm really bad with emails.
That's good to ask. Yep.
Never email me. If you want a response, slide into my DMs on Instagram. Like people know now, like I don't even answer my text messages, Tim. Like they just sit in my phone. Like if you want a response, just DM me on Instagram at Peter Serras is where you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, I've been Tim, you've been Peter, and we've been talking.
Oh, I like that.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Cool.